pro-jihad mobs wreak havoc on U.S. cities, and their president, Joe Biden, says nothing because votes in Michigan are more important than basic decency. Before we get started tonight, I want to give you a quick word from our sponsors. Have you ever wondered what happened to the legendary Chuck Norris? I recently saw a video he made and I was shocked. He is in his 80s and he's still kicking butt and working out and staying active. What's even more shocking is he's stronger, can work out longer, and even has plenty of energy left over for his grandkids. He did this by just making one change. He says he still feels like he's in his 50s, and his wife even started doing this one thing too, and she's never felt better. She says she feels 10 years younger, her body looks leaner, and she has energy all day. Now, Chuck made a special video that explains everything, so make sure you watch it by going to chuckdefense.com/Tomi. It will change the way you think about your health. Once again, that's chuckdefense.com/Tomi. You won't believe how simple it is. Just another day in Tehran. Blue City, America, where pro-jihadis have taken root, and our president says nothing. Absolutely nothing. And while I'm not surprised, I do think it's worth pointing out the fact that Democrats and the Democrats who control the media demand conservatives call out racism, homophobia, transphobia, and January 6th with every breath we take. But when their preferred individuals wave Hezbollah flags in New York City or chant death to America and Israel, they say nothing. Complicit much? And P.S., it's getting a little ridiculous that the media keeps referring to these protesters as pro-Palestinian. Look, if you openly support the destruction of Israel, you are not pro-Palestinian, you are pro-jihadi terrorism, and you should be classified as such. And if you're not a U.S. citizen, you should be deported immediately with zero remorse and no second chances. But aside from those folks, we have another Democrat contingency taking over our country, the illegals. Here are more future Democrat voters, mostly adult military-age males, swarming New York City Hall and demanding better assistance, the right to work, and luxury hotel accommodations instead of these shelters provided by the city. And isn't that just special? Illegals making demands when they have no right to even be here. You really did it, Joe. But if you look at that and decide maybe Joe's version of America isn't for you, well, you're just one of those anti-intellectual mega rednecks, at least according to Katie Couric.
The socioeconomic disparities are a lot, and class resentment is a lot, and anti-intellectualism and elitism is what is driving many of these anti-establishment, which are Trump voters.
You know, I didn't know it was possible for that woman to make more of an ass of herself than when she got that colonoscopy on camera, but there it is. Katie Couric thinks Trump supporters are anti-intellectual and unintelligent, huh? Weird, Katie, because it's not we, the anti-intellectual mega supporters, begging to have our $100,000 student loans accrued for worthless degrees forgiven. It's not we, the anti-intellectual mega supporters who dye our hair green and march with Queers for Palestine banners, Katie. And Katie, if not voting for the guy who walks like he pooped his pants, can't complete a sentence, or use the big boy stairs makes us anti-intellectual rednecks, well then damn, call me a hillbilly and sign me up. Joining me now to weigh in on dumpster fires 1 through 5 is the host of Off Limits, Ian Haworth. So it's a busy week for news. Trump trial going on. Once again, we have the pro-jihad crowd taking to the streets. They never really stopped taking to the streets since Israel was attacked on October 7th, but now it seems to be reignited and more brazen than ever, with these people openly waving terrorist flags, openly chanting death to America. I mean, the college campus is really the hotbed for this. And, you know, today we've got, again, another one of those contentious hearings where we've got university presidents, in this particular case, Columbia, saying, oh, no, we support and respect free speech, but we also support Jewish students. How much of that do you buy?
Yeah, I don't buy any of it. So starting with the mask being off, people were celebrating October 7th on October 7th.
Right.
So when they say it's about the Palestinians, no one who is actually pro-Palestinian is celebrating anything that happened October 7th. If you're pro-Palestinian, you have to be anti-Hamas. All these people are, as you say, pro-jihadi, pro-terrorism. They're anti-Jew, anti-West, anti-America, which is why they're doing exactly what they say they think, which is burning American flags, waving Hezbollah and Hamas flags around. Like, they're being very honest. When people say what they mean, we should probably believe them.
Why does the left and the media go out of their way to try to whitewash this into something it's not? Like, as you said, they're actually sitting there saying, this is what we want. We want to eliminate Israel. We want to eliminate America. They're saying that in America. They're saying that in New York City, obviously the site of 9/11. So why do you think the media and the Democrats are so dedicated to changing this narrative, even against the actual people who were quite comfortable with that narrative?
I think they're just so bought into like the intersectionality stuff of if you're brown, you're good, and if you're white, you're bad. And so I think they cannot allow really their entire infrastructure to accept that maybe some of the people chanting for the death of Jews in the streets are bad. And then you've also got the problem that there is just a level of anti-Semitism in the United States on the right, but mainly on the left right now, that they rather just brush under the rug. So if this was about any other group, they would be up in arms. But because it's about the Jews, they think they can just get a free pass. Because right now, if you look at the intersection of radical Islam and radical leftism, they're really helping each other out right now. So I think there's a lot more to be gained than lost by actually speaking out against this stuff. And they're just happy to keep racking up the debt in every way, especially ideologically right now, and hope it doesn't blow up in their face, quite literally.
What's so weird to me is I think this is all a political calculation. I mean, I do believe that there is a big issue with anti-Semitism in America, especially now and on our college campuses. But these people are not just anti-Jew, anti-Israel. They're anti-America. They hate America. They hate everything that America stands for. And it's really interesting to me that that's become an acceptable narrative to be in America and to openly hate America. And not just hate America like the left-wingers hate America and they hate the American flag and we're oppressive, but they actually want to dismantle it. And the left doesn't seem to have an issue with this because they want to win an election. But you mentioned these groups, the intersectionality of all of this. This is really not much different than BLM in the streets calling for defunding the police. It seems like every 4 years there's just a different group that is co-signed by the Democrat Party. Do you think that that voting bloc is large enough that the calculation the Democrats are making right now is a smart one strategically?
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's as smart as the BLM stuff. Because I think the BLM stuff, they made much more political hay, because I think just the legacy of Black America and slavery and all that kind of thing, I think everyone was more educated on and at least had an opinion on, regardless of where you were on the spectrum. But I think the issue of Israel, Judaism, America, the West, it doesn't really matter where you are politically. If you're in any way moderate, you love America if you live here, by nature of the fact you want to stay here. And so I think the pure radicalism we're seeing of chanting for, the rape, mutilation, murder of people just because they're Jewish. And also, I think most Americans understand that people only really hate Israel because it's Jewish. And I think people only really hate Israel because there is a Jewish and Christian link that is the platform of America. So it's all really one problem. It's you hate the West, you hate America, you hate Israel, you hate Jews, you hate Christians. And I think people need to wake up and realize that, God forbid this ever happens, as a Jewish person, I hope Israel lasts forever. But if these evil people do achieve what they want and the destruction of Israel, Christians are next.
Yeah.
Like, look at Christians in the Middle East. Israel is the only safe place for Christians in the Middle East. Yeah. And so I think most American Christians understand that. And so I don't think it's going to be as politically advantageous just to bang the Hamas drum and see how that goes.
I think some of these people really are pro-jihadi. And then I think some of them are just ignorant. And they just want to be a part of something. And I think it's quite obvious when you're carrying a banner that says Queers for Palestine, I think it's quite obvious that you are ignorant. And that's not me being like, oh, I think these people are ignorant. No, if you are carrying a banner that says Queers for Palestine, you are ignorant. So these same people, though, will also be in the streets in June talking about gay rights. And they'll be talking about women's rights, although not in sports. But these same groups will do this. And I'm not so sure that they're making the connection that these nations that they're cheerleading, whether you're talking about Gaza or you're talking about Iran, where women must wear the hijab and the burqas, but these same people would never succumb to wearing a burqa and covering up their piercings and their green hair. Did they not get it? That if the caliphate were to expand that into America or into Israel and wipe Israel off the face of the earth, that these people wouldn't be able to exist?
No, they just don't get it. I think you hit the nail on the head, is that there's some insidious people with a lot of funding from the Middle East as well, pushing the ideology of radical Islam. And there's a lot of morons on the left who are quite happy to go along with it. So I went to speak at the University of Kentucky a month or two ago on anti-Semitism in Israel, and there was a massive divide in the crowd. There were a lot of Palestinian students or Palestinian residents of the city who came, shouting and screaming at me, all the usual stuff, like I'm pro-genocide, blah, blah, blah. But then there were a lot of white students as well who were just mimicking exactly the same stuff, like the Queers for Palestine, all that kind of thing. And I asked them, what happens to queers in so-called Palestine? They don't have an answer because they haven't gone one step ahead. They literally see it as brown people are oppressed, white people, which apparently includes Jews, even though the majority of Jews in Israel are not white. That's as far as they see it. And if you scratch beneath the surface of the ignorant side, everything implodes. But that happens with everything. That happened with BLM. This, the assumption that all black people are good, all white people are bad. It's the same racism that they rely on every single time.
But it's a lot of the white people that are also have bought into the narrative that white people are bad. So I don't know if that's white guilt on steroids.
100%.
Or it's just wanting to fit in to whatever the popular narrative is on these college campuses, which seems to be the bigger problem here. The propaganda of the left and the jihadis and the Marxists and the communists have broken through to college campuses, and the message of freedom and capitalism and self-determination for some reason has been largely abandoned. It's bizarre to me. I don't know where we go from here, but I think that I'm wondering your perspective on it. I had a conversation with somebody who is a jeweler in New York. I was on Hannah the other night, and I said, Jewish Americans, if you've been voting Democrat, this should be an integral moment for you to take a step back and say, maybe the Democrat Party is not serving me, since they are silent or complicit with the chance to end Israel. And he messaged me and said, listen, there's two different sects of Jews in America. One that's more the Middle Eastern Jew, and then one that are more the European Jew. And the European Jews are always going to vote Democrat because they feel some allegiance to the Democrat Party, but maybe the Middle Eastern Jews are starting to change their minds. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily true. For me, it's more of a religious versus secular. So religious Jews are almost always conservative because they actually live along some level of beliefs or some line of beliefs. Then you've got a lot of secular Jews. You know, I watch Seinfeld every week and I have a bagel every now and again. I might go to shul once or twice a year, and that's about it. I think for a lot of those people, Judaism is more of a label, like an identity label that doesn't actually mean as much as it does if you're a religious Jew or you actually live as a Jew in some way. And so I think that's the divide. And so you've got a lot of these people who think that if they go along with things for long enough, it'll be okay. I mean, if you look at any of Jewish history, that never works. Didn't work in 1930s Germany, for example. And not to just pull out the Holocaust as a flag to wave, as a victim label. But I think I am seeing some American Jews who are not necessarily left-wing, but liberal, moderate, realizing that the Democrats just aren't for them anymore. You've got Joe Biden sucking up to literal jihadis in Michigan because he's worried about losing the state. But that's not America to me. That's not the reason I came to live in this country. And so I'm hoping that other people see it as that simply. You don't even have to like the Republican Party or agree with every single one of their policies. But the fact is, you have Democrats, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, and others who are openly cheering for groups like Hamas.
Yeah.
If you can't move away from that, then you're lost forever.
Yeah, I don't know which direction. I don't know the calculus that the Democrat Party has made. It seems like a stupid one, but I know how strategic they are. So there's got to be something there. I don't think that they're just missing the boat in all this. I think that they've done the calculations. They're very good at that. Disturbing, but strategic. So there's got to be some strategy behind it. And also with the illegal immigration issue. I mean, my God, I just played a clip where you've got military-age males in swarms at New York City Hall because they're mad that they're in shelters and not in the hotels anymore. I mean, this is a large number of people. And this isn't going to stop anytime soon. I mean, even if we shut down the border today, we've still got 10 million that have come in under Joe. Add that to the 20 million that were already here. But, I mean, you've got 30 million people, maybe more. This is not an issue that goes away overnight, even if you have a president that cares about border security. So I don't know where we go from here. And I don't know how quickly the Democrats are going to be able to make it so these people are voting. But I think it's coming, and I don't think it's going to take long.
No, I think it'll take much shorter than the conservative right is willing to admit. I think a lot of this, though, is a symptom of general right-wing laziness, not on an individual level, But on a political level, I think the GOP and the Republican Party have just been kicking the can down the road on these issues. And every now and again, we'll have someone like Donald Trump who comes along and speaks obvious truths, like we should secure the border. But too often we've had people who have just been squishy on this issue, unwilling to say that illegal immigration is bad. Unfettered immigration is bad. Allowing people in with no idea who they are, what they believe, what they want to do. These things are bad without being labeled a racist. And so I think the problem here is that we're going to have more of the same, just long term, unless as a movement we all rally behind almost like an institutional, generational fight against this. It doesn't matter if every 4 years or so we have a Republican who comes in and maybe tightens border security a little bit. It has to be a wider movement than that. It has to be a closing the door, getting rid of the people who are here who should not be here, and just looking in the face of the issue, the fact that people are dying because of this. Whenever the left talk about this, it's always, if it saves one life, it's worth it.
Yeah.
We should ban all guns because if it saves one life. How many people have been murdered, raped, brutalized by an illegal immigrant who, by definition, should not be here? That logic doesn't apply. I think we need to apply that logic to illegal immigration. As an immigrant, I'm obviously pro-immigration.
Right.
Illegal immigration, pretty different.
Well, and I think that there's a nuts and bolts issue to this too, that, you know, I hear a lot of conservatives talking about it. I hear a lot of them, you know, that will come on Fox News and they will talk about the importance of border security, and they will talk about fentanyl, and they will talk about Laken Riley and all important things. But I see another side of this too, beyond just the headline making stuff of when an American gets murdered by an illegal. I'm looking at the nuts and bolts, and I'm thinking, we are importing poverty. We are importing millions of people who do not speak English. We are importing millions and millions of people who are already impoverished, who had $10,000 to pay to a cartel, but once they get here, they have relatively nothing. And we are adding them to our communities, and they're going to have to be taken care of. They're either going to have to work, which is only a short leap to they're going to vote, or they're going to have to be taken care of. And that's what you're seeing now in Denver. They want to defund a portion of their police department so they can take care of the illegals. I look at the nuts and bolts of this because some people will say, oh, you know, the Laken Riley thing, 1 in a million. But I think when you take it down to the community level and you're like, yeah, but beyond just these horrific incidents that are happening with violence, let's just think about even the ones that are not violent, that are just here, that are going to take up your resources. And people say, oh, you know, you can't say that. Why can't you say that? You're paying taxes. These people are not. And we're importing poverty. This is going to have ramifications that are going to go well beyond the next 4 years. This is going to bankrupt our country. And these people are going to have kids that are going to go to our schools, that are going to need medical care, that all these things. It's like there's only so long that this can go on. And I don't know if Republicans are talking about it.
Well, they're not, because they're afraid to. Because I think too often they'd rather just ignore it. I also think there are a lot of Republicans at the highest level who do benefit from illegal immigration in terms of the workforce and things like that. But I think to go to an even deeper level, we've got to think about what is America. Like, people always talk about, whenever you criticize illegal immigration, it's always, oh, what about people coming in the 1800s, 1900s? What about me? I'm an immigrant. I'm a hypocrite, therefore. America is coming here and taking responsibility for your life, your family, and making something yourself. The big problem with the Democrats and immigration right now is they're pushing the idea that you come here and you are owed something. Like we saw that in New York City, people expecting to be given green cards, expecting to be given work visas. You should be coming here willing to work to support yourself, wanting to become an American for what America is, not because you want to turn America into what Western Europe has become. I think that's the problem, is that people have been stepping away from saying that America is good. American values are good. These are things worth defending. They'd much rather dilute it with illegal immigration, people not speaking English, people not really pushing an American culture, as if that's something to be ashamed of.
Because assimilate has become a dirty word. And I don't know why, because any other nation that you'd go to, you'd be expected to assimilate. If I go to the Middle East right now dressed like this, what do you think is going to happen to me?
You won't be there very long.
So I need to assimilate. And I would, as a matter of respect, because I wouldn't go into somebody else's country and demand that they conform to my ideas and they conform to my culture. I would go to another nation, I would respect their culture because I am a guest in their nation or in their continent, for goodness sakes. But we don't talk about assimilation. We say, oh, well, you know, you don't have to assimilate. Listen, if you want to have your culture that you grew up with, and we are a nation of immigrants, and that's just fine. But to be able to assimilate into American culture is an important element that we've completely stopped talking about because we don't want to be called a name. This really all boils down to conservative weakness and our inability to be able to withstand being called names. And that's what it goes down to. I want to turn now to Donald Trump, though. In the courtroom again this week. We're talking about the jurors, and we're talking about some of the social media posts made by some of the jurors and being anti-Trump. And it's like, duh.
Yeah.
I don't know how you could be in New York City and be impartial.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, even with the meritless aspect of this hush money trial, is there any chance that he gets out of this unscathed, given the jury pool that they have to choose from?
Yeah, I would be incredibly shocked if he comes away unscathed, because I think anyone who is conservative in New York is already fighting an uphill battle. Like if I was arrested, no one really knows who I am there, and I would have a tough time. And I think you'd be actually hard pressed to find someone who's pro-Trump but is not willing to admit that, which is the problem with the jury duty stuff, right? Is they are saying like no Orthodox Jews, for example. They're squeezing anyone who could possibly be in any way pro-Trump. But that's the problem, is it's not pro-Trump, it's just anti the obvious corruption that's going on here, which is the leverage of the justice system to squeeze out political opponents. And it's pretty worrying, because again, people always say if it happens to Trump, it'll happen to you. I actually think it's reverse. I think this has been happening to normal people on the right, and it's gotten so extreme that even someone like Donald Trump, with all of his resources, all of his connections, it can happen to him now. I think we've come this far. People need to wake up to it, because the genie's out of the bottle. It doesn't go back in, I don't think.
Well, I even think about it because people always say that you're right. Like if it happened to Trump, it can happen to me. And I think about me as obviously a conservative public figure. I live in Tennessee, so I'm good, I hope. If I was in Texas, I think I'd be good. Florida, I think I'd be good. A handful of other states, I think I'd be good. But if something went down and someone just wanted to charge me with something just ridiculous off the wall in a blue state, I'm not so sure that I could get a fair shake. I mean, that's terrifying to think about in the United States of America, that just your political beliefs could really put you in a horrible position, and you don't really have any recourse for it if everything is turning against the conservative element. You know, we always say we're the silent majority, but I don't know where the majority is. Maybe we're too silent. Something was brought up the other day, and I have to give Jesse Kelly credit for this, because he said, listen, the communists know what they're doing. They actually get involved. Conservatives, you know, we will go to church or wear a MAGA hat or we'll tweet, but we're not going and getting on the school board. We're not getting on HOA boards. We're not getting on committees. We're not getting on city councils. We're not doing the hard work that it actually takes to preserve and protect our communities. And the left is.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's why they're winning. It's because they're not only doing this, they've been doing it for decades. And conservatives have been sitting back. It's somewhat understandable. Conservatives tend to be more individualistic. So I'll look after my family and I don't really care about anything else. A good example of this, I think, is the homeschooling issue. In the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of conservatives go down the route of pull your kid out of school. You should homeschool. That's the solution for your family. One, if you're able to. There are a lot of parents who don't have the resources or the time or the ability. But what about everyone else's kid who is just being left to the whims of the school system, and we're just abandoning it to the left, even more so? And then in 5 years, we'll be complaining, how did the education system get even worse? Well, it's because we ran away from it. And if you look at every institution in America, the right has, to a greater or lesser extent, ran away from it, and then we just complain. Vote for me and everything will change. Voting for someone at the top level isn't going to change a thing. As you said, we need people on the lowest levels getting involved in schools, but getting involved in the science, whatever that's become. Every single institution we need people getting involved with a long-term goal of actually affecting change, not just this November, vote for me and I'll click my fingers and everything will change, because that's just not how it works. The Democrats have won because they dedicated decades to this, and they're reaping the rewards right now.
Right. Well, I think that that's a perfect example of when Donald Trump was elected in 2016. I mean, we had years of prosperity. Economically, things were going well, and that helped us.
Yes.
And that made us feel good, and that made things less expensive in the grocery store. It made gas less expensive. It made our border more secure. It made, you know, our foreign relations stronger. But if you're at the local level, Donald Trump being president didn't really help you if your city council is liberal and your school board's liberal and they're teaching your kids about rainbows and, you know, gender identity. It really didn't help you if you weren't willing to get involved at that level. And there's only so much time that's going to be that window that conservatives can actually get involved before it's so stacked against them that running for something isn't going to matter anymore. It's like running as a Republican in Los Angeles. Good luck.
Yes.
So, I mean, what's your message to them? And they're in a red state. A lot of people think, oh, you know, you're in Tennessee, you're safe. Not so much. We still got drag shows for kids here. We still got Pride this and being promoted in the schools and CRT and all that. What's your message for people in red states who think they're safe?
Yeah, I think no one is safe. I think everyone is safe until they're not, and then it's too late. And I also think people need to realize that children need to be the focus. Children and parents. Parents are the largest untapped voting bloc there is. Most parents, the vast majority, care about their kids. But parents need to be really involved in what their kids are being taught, because unfortunately, truth is objective, but my truth or that whole nonsense is incredibly subjective. If we allow the left to control things like education, children will grow up knowing what is true, even though it's false. They will know that there is no such thing as gender. They will know that the rainbow flag or the LGBTQ ABCDEFG community is a great thing and should be introduced to ever younger children. They will know that children should have surgery to change their gender if they decide to at the age of 3, 4, 5 years old. They will know these things. There's a huge difference between 18-year-olds being told something and they think, well, wait a minute, I'm not too sure, to a 5-year-old knowing it. And we only have a generation every single time to fight back against that, because the second you have a generation who know that is true, you blink and they're the generation making policy. They're the generation funding things. And we cannot let that happen, because once that happens, it doesn't really matter how we tweet, if we can tweet anymore. Like, we lose all these different avenues of power that we've already really lost access to in many ways. And so I think we have to be focusing on education, we have to be focusing on children, and we have to be focusing on really imparting American values onto those children, because otherwise everything will get diluted to the point that no one even remembers what these things mean anymore.
American values, basic values would be nice.
Math.
I mean, math would be nice. Things that, you know, learning how to do things, learning how to interact with others, I think is important. I'm glad you brought up the homeschooling thing, because I think that that's something that hasn't been talked about enough. Because I hear, you know, a lot of parents say it, and I've said it, hey, listen, I don't have kids, but I'm like, hey, listen, get your kids into a private school or get your kids into a homeschooling situation. Well, you're right. That's completely neglecting the kids that are never going to be able to be in that position. And what about them? You know, are we willing to just say, oh, well, you know, they can figure it out? Well, guess what? You might think that because you want to protect your little family and you might be able to do things for your little family, but those are the people that are going to be churning out of the public school system and into positions and into the workforce. And if we just sit there and protect like our little family unit, we're going to lose and lose big. So I think that's a really important point that you brought up. Last thing I want to talk to you about too is, in keeping with that, I think we've all seen the horrific videos on social media, and I'm sure there's, in part, social media amplifies it, but the number of young people who I always say have gone feral, who are beating the absolute living hell out of each other. And the school doesn't seem to be doing much about it. You had, you know, the poor girl in Kansas City who had her head bashed into the cement that just came out of her coma. But we're seeing these videos more regularly. We're seeing the special needs teacher who was relentlessly elbowing the little special needs kid in the bus. I mean, we're seeing this more and more, but especially with young people and how violent they are. I'm wondering how you think we get a grip on this.
I think it's hard, because once you have a level of violence that becomes acceptable and celebrated, it's hard to undo that quickly. So I think it has to be, again, a generational change. I think we have to have consequences for things. I think law and order has to matter again. And the idea that quite often you see these schools, they try and handle it internally. Like, that's attempted murder. Some of these videos we see, if you're slamming someone's head into a concrete floor, I know friends who came into comas, like playing rugby, for example, hit their head wrong and they're in a coma. Like, hitting your head is no joke. And so I think there have to be consequences beyond being kept out of school for a couple of days.
Suspension. What kind of? I always thought suspension was a really weird punishment.
It's a reward.
Because some people do not care if they are suspended or suspended 20 times or 30 times. That is not uncomfortable for them.
Yeah, it's oh no, I don't have to go to school, poor me.
Yeah.
But so I think in terms of violence in society, we're just seeing it celebrated. I think that has to change, but that has to change on a community level. It has to be not elevating people who are violent. And ultimately, communities are going to have to take responsibilities for themselves. It's all very well talking again about the high level as if whoever is president matters. But you have Joe Biden threatening to take people behind the bike sheds and beat them up. You know, there's a level of violence that I think has always been here in society. But if we want to elevate and actually grow as a civilization, there's a time and a place for violence, of course. But to celebrate it, I think trickles down. And I think we all have to make a collective effort to not shy away from violence, but stand in the way and actually condemn it when it comes up on any level.
Yeah.
Because I think, for example, one other thing on that is we see videos, for example, of people being beaten up, and some people who criticize some videos, depending on the context, will cheer it on. And I think we need to be a bit more uniform in that, you know, violence isn't something to be celebrated. It can be used, but I think the celebration of it is the issue for me.
So this is the last thing I want to talk about, because tomorrow I have an episode, a special episode airing with Kyle Rittenhouse. So this kind of goes perfectly in line with that. It's been mentioned that because of the rising crime and how violent things have been getting, whether you want to talk about the people waving the Hezbollah flag, Jews being assaulted, or just women being punched in the face in New York City. This is a problem that really is nationwide. Some places are handling it better than others, i.e. Florida. But it's been said that there's going to be a rise of this vigilantism because decent people are going to be so upset that the law enforcement element is not able to handle the problem because they've been told to stand down in large part, that there's going to be a rise of vigilantism that we are going to see because of this. What do you think about that? Do you think that that's coming?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm seeing it with Jews in places like New York who for the first time are learning how to use firearms. They absolutely should, by the way. When people are out to try and kill you because you're Jewish, you should absolutely arm yourself. But I think people get tired. You see it in societies all across the world. And I think people also get angry when they see people who do stand up. For example, the gentleman who was arrested on a subway in New York
Daniel
for
Penny.
defending people from potentially deadly violence, gets thrown in jail. People get angry about that too. And so I think, again, it's a failure of not the law enforcement community, because I know many fantastic law enforcement officers, many of whom are retiring because they can't do their job. It's the political element of that sees law enforcement as something to be diluted and toned down and be ashamed of. And until that returns, you can either have law enforcement, or you're going to have vigilantism, or you're going to have chaos. Only one of those is really a good option if you care about values and law and order and things like that, because vigilantism, people are going to defend their family. Whether you like it or not, whether you ban all the guns, people are going to pick up sticks and rocks and knives and defend their family because people care about their families. It's like the fundamental biological reason we exist. And so I think whoever disagrees with that needs to look very hard in the mirror and actually accept biological reality, which is hard for a lot of people right now, and just realize that it's one path or the other. And only one really ends with calm and prosperity and peace and opportunity for people. And the other is going to be some level of chaos.
I think it really boils down to two things: education and family. If you have a great family, then you are already privileged. We use that term privilege, but you're privileged if you have a good family. If you don't have a good family, God, I wish our education system was one that kind of filled in the gaps. And I don't mean from a nanny state perspective, I mean just teaching people right from wrong and basic decency. And unfortunately, both are being whittled away right under our noses. And conservatives are too scared of being called a name to stand up and change course. So I think that's kind of the overall message. But I do think that there is some hope. There are some people, Governor Greg Abbott, Governor Ron DeSantis being two of those people, who are willing to stand up and do something even when it seems impossible. So that is, to me, the bright spots, and let's just hope there are more like them. But Ian, it's good to be in Tennessee, at least for now. And thank you so much for being here and having the discussion. I hope to have you back soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.